Welcome back to Three and Out. Although today it's kind of more like one and done. But yeah, we're coming back at you today with a ranking in college football 25. This week is rankings week for the game. So as part of their rollout today through the 28th, they're giving us different little tidbits and insights into different parts of the game, which is pretty cool to see. Some cool content that we're going to dive into this coming week. So today they released a top 25 toughest places to play in the game. So we're just going to dive in head first and take a look at this list and see what they've ranked these stadiums. So we have a graphic here of the top 10 and the rest of the top 25 is down there. So we're just going to dive straight into the top 10. Starting at number 1 with Kyle Field, which is a little bit of a surprise to me. I think in nature they should at least be top 3 to 5 just because of the capacity of the stadium. One of the few stadiums in college football to have over 100,000 seats, and they do get loud. They get very loud. I think the main thing for me here is the product they've been putting on the field these past few years. We all know how Jimbo Fisher ended up buying them out. Huge buyout. They have Mike Elko, who's had success at Duke, coming in this coming season. So we'll see how well they do. They have a ton of talent. Jimbo recruited well with the NIL and the boosters behind him, but couldn't really translate it to on the field. We'll see what Elko can do with it. I don't mind them being up pretty high on this list. I personally wouldn't put them at number 1. There's another team in the top 10 I put at number 1, but we'll get there. Number 2 is Bryant-Denny Stadium, Alabama. Don't mind this at all. Top 3 Alabama, I feel like, is a lock pretty much with what they've done under Saban. Saban's gone, so we may see this change a little bit in performance on the field. But up until this point, Alabama's been a flat-out dynasty. They've been dominant. They don't lose very often at home. They lost to Texas this past season at home, but before that, I'm kind of struggling to remember when the last time they lost at home was. Let me know in the comments. I'm not an Alabama fan. It's eluding me, but it's been a while since they've lost at home outside of that Texas game, I believe, because they lost to LSU on that when they went for 2 in overtime, but I believe that was in Death Valley. Definitely a tough place to play. I think 2 is justified here. 3 is Tiger Stadium for LSU. I would have this at number 1 personally. I think Tiger Stadium is the toughest place to play in college football, especially at night. LSU has been so consistent. They haven't really fielded a terrible team in a while. Anytime you go into Tiger Stadium, no matter how good LSU is, you're in for a fight. So I would have them at number 1. Top 3 is fine. At least they're close to it. So I'm cool with that. 4 is the shoe, Ohio State. Top 5 for Ohio State with how they performed recently, I feel like isn't out of the question. I feel like it might be warranted. But my biggest argument here is the fact they've dropped the past 2 games against their arch rival, Michigan, at home. The last 2 home games they played against them, they've lost. They kind of, underperformed when it comes to the end of the season and the games that really count. They've been playing, the Big Ten schedule, not to knock it too hard, but outside of Michigan and Penn State, the home games that they played haven't been the toughest to play, I don't think. But you can't argue the results. It is still obviously a very tough place to play when they field a team as good as they've fielded these past few years. If your name isn't Michigan, if your name isn't Michigan and you're going in there, you're probably not going to get a win. So I can vibe with it. I can see it. It's fine. I personally would have Sanford Stadium at 5 over them, solely because with Georgia, what they've done in this decade has spoken for itself. Back-to-back national champions. Fell short last year, lost in the SEC championship, but haven't dropped a game at home since they lost to South Carolina in 2019. So they haven't lost in Sanford Stadium this decade, which is pretty impressive, pretty hard to beat. I would have them at 4. I would flip-flop 4 and 5, but, kind of splitting hairs there, ticky-tacky. It is what it is. 6 is Beaver Stadium. I feel like that might be a little high. No disrespect to Penn State. They have a great environment. They have the whiteout. They get up. They get rowdy. But usually that whiteout game isn't really a marquee matchup. I feel like it's more of like, when you schedule your homecoming game, you don't want to lose that, right? I feel like it's kind of more of that vibe. But, top 10, I think maybe towards the back of the top 10 would be a better spot for him. Just looking at it right now, I would not rank Beaver Stadium above Florida State as of right now. Now, if we're talking historically, then, that's another conversation. I don't know really what they're thinking in terms of ranking them with, the history of the stadium in mind as compared to what they're going to be this upcoming season. But in terms of this upcoming season, I think it's a little high, but still a great environment. Same goes with number 7, Wisconsin. Great historic blue blood environment, but they're not really producing at the level that they have been now, right? Feels a little high in the top 10. I could see them out of the top 10. Definitely in the top 25, not to knock them too hard, but a bit high for me here. Oklahoma, I think I could have over either of those teams. They've performed pretty well at home, very consistent team. Going to have a shot to make the 12-team playoff this upcoming year. I don't mind them at 8. I think top 10 for Oklahoma is warranted. Although Texas isn't in the top 10. They're on the list. We'll get to them later. But some interesting teams that are left out of the top 10 for sure. And then rounding out the top 10 are 2 teams from Florida. Florida State and then Florida. Doak Campbell at 9. I think it should be a bit higher with how Florida State has performed. Great environment. Love to go to a game there one day. Some really cool traditions. The tomahawk chop. Big Braves fan, so I can get with that. And then you have, I don't know the names of all these traditions, but when they ride in on the horse before the game with a flaming spear, sticking in midfield, super cool. Really good environment. So top 10 at the very least, could be even higher here. And then rounding it out with Florida, same argument where they're not really putting the best product on the field right now, but I can see the vision because of the fact that they're, probably what you could consider a blue blood in their history. And it's kind of a iconic stadium in the lore of college football. I mean, everybody, whether you're a Florida fan or not, knows about the Swamp, right? Very unique environment and stadium. So I feel like that's probably what gets them the nod here into the top 10, which I can understand, especially since this game hasn't really been around for over a decade, right? So if you're looking at it in terms of that, then I can see where they're coming from there. But that's the top 10. And then we're going to round it out looking at 11 through 25. So at 11, you have Oregon. Really good environment. I could make an argument to push it into the top 10 after this past season. Not the biggest stadium in terms of capacity, but boy, did they get up and get loud. They get rowdy in there, despite the size of the stadium. And Oregon, obviously, beating Washington this past year at home. No, excuse me. They lost to Washington at home. So there you go. Bumps them down a little bit. But nonetheless, I think Oregon is a hard place to play and definitely deserves a spot in the top 25. 12, you have Clemson. Don't mind them out of the top 10. I mean, I could definitely see people who would want them in the top 10, which, their performance over the past decade with Dabo, I think could warrant them maybe being a little bit closer to the top 10 here. You have some really cool traditions. Howard's Rock, and they, I think it's called Meet at the Paw after the game. They storm the field after every home game if they win it. So a lot of rich tradition in Clemson Stadium. So I can see them being a little bit higher, but, definitely should be on this list. 13 is Neyland Stadium, Tennessee, which for me is kind of shocking how low it is. I regard Neyland as one of the tougher stadiums to play in all of college football. Even more than, not maybe close to the level, I'll say that, close to the level of Texas A&M. A lot of seats in that stadium. It's kind of built like a cup. So it's straight up. It's designed where the noise bounces off the stands back in. Deafeningly loud. I think they probably should have been in the top 10. But, is what it is. Moving on to 14. I think a lot of people may be upset about this just because of the rich history of Jordan Hare. the kick six, the miracle tip pass against Georgia. It's been a while. It's 2013. It's been a decade. So some time has passed. Auburn hasn't really been very consistent on the field either. We'll see if Hugh Freeze turns that around, but the past couple of head coaches for Auburn haven't really produced too much on the field. So I can see why that drops them down out of the top 10, but in the top 15, which is warranted, I believe. 15 is Williams-Brice Stadium, South Carolina. This surprises me over the Big House a lot. And we'll get to Michigan at 16 in a second, but putting South Carolina over the Big House is crazy to me. I don't know what it is. We've been very open on this channel. I'm a Georgia fan, so maybe it's just that part of me, but the thought of going into South Carolina, going to Columbia for a game doesn't really frighten me that much, and I can't really imagine it frightens too many teams. I mean, I don't know. Like, they have some cool gimmicks. They have Darude Sandstorm, and they play that little rooster noise on third downs. And they have some decent traditions. But outside of that, I mean, I don't know if I would have put them even on this top 25, if I'm being quite frank. So that does surprise me a little bit, especially over Michigan at 16. I think Michigan could be in the top 10. Easily. The Big House, their performance over the last few years at the Big House has been outstanding. They haven't really lost there too often. And if you have Ohio State at 4, I think you need to put Michigan a bit closer to the top 10, if not in the top 10. I know they lost a lot of production this year to the draft. A lot of talent left, but even then, I think it's still going to be a tough place to play. Number 17 is Va Tech. I like that a lot. I would love to go to a game, a Virginia Tech home game one day, solely to just see the Enter Sandman entrance in person. It's a sight to see everybody jumping up and down in the stadium before the game. They definitely get rowdy. Unfortunate that they weren't able to get the licensing for Metallica for Enter Sandman to actually put it in the game. So hopefully whatever metal song they decide to replace with it still does the entrance justice, and maybe a little further down the line they can work out something and get the actual song in the game. But I'm sure it'll look great regardless, and I'm excited to see it. I like that. I like them at 17. 18 is Rice-Eccles Stadium, Utah. I can see it. Utah has been pretty damn good over the past few years. Last year was a bit of a down year, but they've been a big contender in the Pac-12 these past few years, even won it a couple times. And with the return of Cam Rising this upcoming season, I could definitely see it being a tough place to play for rival teams in the conference coming in and playing there. 19 is DKR, Texas, one of the new additions to the SEC this upcoming year. Kind of low on the list. I mean, there's quite the discrepancy between Oklahoma and Texas, the two new additions to the SEC on this list. I would have Texas a little higher, even if it's not just the environment. The team that they're fielding is going to be tough to go in there and beat them. Made the playoff last year, lost to Washington in the semifinal, but still made it pretty far and performed very well. Have a good little bit of returning talent, especially with Quinn Ewers at quarterback. Very big. But with them being added to the SEC, I'll be interested to see how that tests their home field advantage, with a lot of teams coming in there that have not come in there in a long time, even ever. So we'll see about that. Number 20 is Kinnick Stadium, Iowa. I think they had to be on this list. Really cool tradition, the Kinnick Wave, the Children's Hospital. So I think they were definitely warranted a spot on this list. And aside from that, even though Iowa doesn't really know how to play football, play offense in a way that is conductive to forward pass or modern football even, the defense that they field definitely makes up for at least a little bit of it. It's going to be tough when you come in. You may not be able to score very many points. It's a low-scoring game. So their defense kind of saves them a little bit there, and it's definitely a tough place to play. 21 is Notre Dame up in South Bend, Indiana. Another one of those iconic blue blood stadiums in college football that pretty much had to be on this list. Notre Dame has been improving, going out and scheduling some big names. So we'll see how they do in 2024, but a worthy addition to this list for sure. 22 is Michigan State, which surprises me. I don't think they should be on this list, quite frankly. Maybe if you asked me in 2015, I would have said yes, but after Mel Tucker, since Mel Tucker, they have really fallen off in terms of what they used to be back in the days of, I think of Le'Veon Bell, Kirk Cousins, guys like that. They just don't have it nowadays. So I don't really understand the addition of them on this list, and it's not like they're a blue blood or really a historic stadium. I think they definitely could have been on this list in their heyday, but I don't think they deserve a spot here now. And then rounding it out with the last three stadiums, you have Arkansas, which again I don't think should be on this list. Some of these teams on the back end I think are questionable, which I get it. I mean, you have these bubble fringe teams, you can make arguments for not being on there, but with Arkansas, same argument. The product that they're fielding nowadays, I don't think warrants them a spot on this list. Not really a historic stadium. Not really a super tough place to play if you're looking at it, through the lens of the SEC. I think in terms of the SEC, they're mid to bottom tier places to play on, like how hard they are. Off the top of my head, I would be more afraid to go play Missouri, even, I'd say, arguably Kentucky. I think they have better home field advantages there. So yeah, kind of weird there, but is what it is. 24 is Boise State, which I really like that a lot. Classic look with the Smurf turf. Can't wait to boot up the game and see what that looks like in game. Always a great place to do a dynasty for in college football games like this, just because of the field. It's cool to look at, and a really cool team, really cool colorway, color scheme. A lot you can do with it. I like it a lot. I'm glad to see that a different color turf team is on here. Outside of Boise State, it's kind of hard to think of who else you could put on here. My mind goes to Coastal Carolina first, but obviously they're not going to get on here. Along with some of those other lower tier FBS teams. But nice to see some representation there. And then rounding it out at 25 is Mississippi State. I see why they did this. 25 is, the definition of a bubble team. I think what put them over the top is the cowbell tradition. It's pretty interesting. It's hard for an opposing team to come in there. They kind of have to learn how to communicate through, other means of, hand signals or what have you. Just because with the cowbells, it's so loud, you can't really hear anything. I think they got it grandfathered in where, the rule about the artificial noisemakers doesn't really apply to them just because of the tradition that they have. So that definitely gives them an advantage, and I can see why they were included on this list. I would put them above Arkansas and Michigan State even. Just to kind of reiterate how surprised I am at those two additions on this list. But yeah, there you have it. That rounds out the list at 25. So to repeat the top 10, number 1 is Texas A&M, 2 is Alabama, 3 is LSU, 4 is Ohio State, 5 is Georgia, 6 is Penn State, 7 is Wisconsin, 8 is Oklahoma, 9 is Florida State, and 10 is Florida. So be sure to let me know in the comments what you think of this list. If you agree, if you disagree, where you would put these teams. If your team is on this list, let me know what you think. If they're too high, not high enough, or if they're where you think they should be. So we're going to be here all week covering the information that they're dropping about EA College Football 25. I'm going to be writing solo for a few of them. I think Noah might join me for one, maybe even Drew. But yeah, we're going to be here covering it. So if you like what you see, please be sure to subscribe. We're going to be here covering, like I said, covering it and covering everything leading up to the EA College Football 25 release. And then when it comes out, we're going to be doing content on the game itself. And that should roll us nicely into this season. And we're also going to start doing preview content soon. It's something we get excited about every year going into the season, making predictions, kind of taking a deep dive at what we think is going to happen and how things are going to shake out conference to conference. Giving playoff predictions, stuff like that. So if you have anything you want to see in terms of that, let us know. If there's any team in particular that's your favorite team that you want to see us talk about in the previews, we're more than happy to. So any feedback you have is more than welcomed. We're here to do this for y'all and do what you want to see. So if there's anything you do want to see, please do let us know. Thank you for sticking around, and thank you for watching. And we'll see you in the next one.